I think for a lot of young people, their interest in history begins with an interest in war and warfare and combat and things like that, or possibly that was just me, but certainly that was true for me. And one of the things I used to feed my interest before, I went to college when I was a young person was watching movies about war, primarily movies about World War II. And so I kind of developed a definitive list of movies, war movies that I thought were great, and I thought I'd share that list with you today. The idea for this video came from Sean D. Standfast, who made a similar list over on his channel. I'll leave a link to that down below so you can go watch and enjoy his. If you don't know this about Sean, he has a real interest in silent movies, and so there are a lot of those on his list. I've seen a few of those. One of those I really do like, but I did kind of intentionally try to make my list a little bit different, and I think it would have been primarily different anyway. But anyway, I have two honorable mentions, and I'm going to do the top 10, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. This, by the way, is a top 10 list, 10 to 1, two honorable mentions coming first. So the first movie that I have on my list as an honorable mention is A Bridge Too Far, directed by Richard Attenborough, and pretty much starring every male star in Great Britain and in the United States. I think in the 1970s. Just to kind of give you a rundown, it has James Caan, it has Michael Caine, it has Robert Redford, Sean Connery, I have on there twice, Gene Hackman, Laurence Olivier, Dirk Bogarde. I've forgotten any number of other people who star in A Bridge Too Far. So this kind of huge ensemble cast, and you're going to see this is kind of one of the things that I like in a war movie is a big cast and kind of epic things. And it basically tells the story, fictionalized slightly, story of Operation Market Garden. It's based on a book by a historian called Cornelius Ryan. It tells the story of Operation Market Garden, which was an attempt by the Allies, really come up with by British Field Marshal Montgomery to try to, bypass the Hindenburg Line the difficult way into Germany and to capture three key bridges, which then would allow quick access into Germany, and it involved coordinating paratroopers, tank corps, as well as infantry corps to kind of drive through Belgium and the Netherlands to capture these bridges to gain access into Germany. That's what it's about. That mission failed, and it failed in a big way. Perhaps in a way which set back Allied progress for a little while. But the movie is just, in lots of ways brilliant. Like I said, as a big cast, lots of, what appear to be original or really good replicas of World War II, planes and tanks and jeeps and guns. And I forgot to mention Anthony Hopkins is in it. He plays the leader or commander of a British paratrooper group that gets caught in Arnhem, I believe, and suffer terribly. And it's a very kind of British performance. I just really like the movie. And so I had to put on my list somewhere, and it's here as an honorable mention. My second honorable mention is Henry V, the Kenneth Branagh version, which was filmed 1989 or released in 1989. This made Henry V my favorite Shakespeare play for quite some time. It has a large cast of well-known British Shakespearean actors: Ian Holm, Paul Scofield, Derek Jacobi, Brian Blessed, among many others who are in this adaptation of Shakespeare's Henry V. And if you've never seen or read Henry V, Henry V has a lot of great speeches. Once more into the breach, Band of Brothers speech, etc. So there's a lot of really kind of motivational, warlike stuff in the movie. And Branagh actually filmed some battle scenes, kind of medieval-looking battle scenes, which I found interesting. And it's a really good adaptation, and I think it's a really good movie. My third honorable mention is The Quiet American. This is based on a novel by Graham Greene, the only Graham Greene novel I've read. This movie stars Michael Caine. By the way, you might notice a trend here. This movie stars Michael Caine and Brendan Fraser in this kind of story set around the beginnings of the conflict in Vietnam and American interference there. Michael Caine plays a reporter who essentially is keeping a young Vietnamese woman as his lover. Now, keeping is an old term, but essentially he is paying her upkeep, etc., to live with him and to have sex with him. And he falls in love with her and he doesn't want to lose her, and he's afraid he's going to be reassigned back to Great Britain where he's married, and he keeps promising this young woman that he'll get a divorce and that he'll be able to marry her, even though he knows this isn't really true. Enter Brendan Fraser, who is an American. He is the quiet American in the story, and over the course of the story we learn something really important about Brendan Fraser's character and who he really is and how that impacts the war in Vietnam. It contains an absolutely brutal scene of a bombing which kills civilians in Saigon. It contains some brutal scenes of the aftermath of violence taking place in South Vietnam between the various forces fighting for control after Ngo Dinh Diem was deposed by the Americans. And it ends with really kind of an important twist, which I won't give away here, but a really good movie, I thought, well acted, and a really good message about the futility, particularly, of the war in Vietnam. Which gets us then to my top 10. At number 10, I have The Hurt Locker, which is directed by Catherine Bigelow, and it stars Jeremy Renner, Anthony Mackie are two of the bigger names, two of the more well-known people in that movie. Renner won an Oscar for this, and this is a movie set in Iraq during the American Allied involvement in the war in Iraq, and Jeremy Renner plays a demolitions person. He's a part of a bomb disposal unit. If you remember the war in Iraq, IEDs, improvised explosive devices, were a big deal and wounded and killed a lot of American and our allies' soldiers in Iraq. So disposing of these things, detecting them, finding them, disposing of these things was a big deal and something that, you know, the military had to engage in. Renner plays one of these people, and clearly when we watch the movie, he's been at it too long. It would be unfair to say he has a death wish, but what I would say is he has a lackadaisical ideas about his own survival, which are, you know, subject to or probably part of his own PTSD in doing this incredibly dangerous job and seeing awful things. There are scenes of brutal graphic violence here, some incredibly disturbing scenes, but Renner's portrayal is great, and you know, I'm not a combat veteran myself, but what appears to be kind of the realism of the difficulty in which those soldiers found themselves effectively causes you to question, you know, U.S. involvement there in the first place, and what it did to American soldiers, but also what it did to Iraqi civilians. I think it's a great movie, and it's my number 10. And number 9 is All Quiet on the Western Front. This is the 1930s edition, the original, or the first, I should say, adaptation. It stars Lou Ayres. It was based on the novel by Eric Maria Remarque, which is probably the most famous of all World War I novels. I know there was a remake of it not long ago, but I really like the 1930s version. It's not silent, it's a talking movie. But the movie is all black and white, and you know, it has kind of that stilted acting sort of from the time period, but I really appreciate the special effects given, you know, what was possible. It captures the spirit of the story, the anti-war ideas of the story, the suffering of the soldiers, life in the trenches, the randomness of death, the relative cruelty and callousness that built up in soldiers, all the things the book captures, the movie captures just as well. And like I said, it has some, what I think are really good special effects for the time period. And so, you know, All Quiet on the Western Front is my 9th favorite war movie. You know, I was in high school in the 1980s, in high school and college in the 1980s, when really a whole raft of movies about the Vietnam War came out. Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now, which came out a little before that. What I was thinking, Hamburger Hill, all kinds of movies like that came out. And to me, the best of all those Vietnam movies was Platoon, written and directed by Oliver Stone, who goes on to be, you know, quite a character. It stars Charlie Sheen, Tom Berenger, Willem Dafoe is in there, Forrest Whitaker, as well as a lot of other actors. You're going to recognize Johnny Depp has a role in the movie as well. And it basically, you know, is kind of a fictionalized version of Stone's own experiences as a Vietnam combat soldier, where Stone earned a Bronze Star for bravery. And essentially what it looks at is a platoon of American soldiers in Vietnam who are divided between, their loyalties divided between two sergeants who are kind of competing for the actual kind of control over the platoon. One is really gung-ho, ruthless, vicious killer, and the other is a guy who does a lot of drugs and seems more interested in peace than in killing, but is nonetheless a really effective soldier who earns his men's respect. And so what we see here is the main character, Charlie Sheen. We see kind of a battle for his heart, his conscience, which way is he going to go, who's he going to be loyal to. And, the movie ends in, tragic fashion for some of the soldiers, and the Charlie Sheen character, based on Stone, gets out. I think it's just a really good, really well done movie, giving you an idea of the claustrophobia of the fighting in the jungle, and the fear and the kind of tension that those men had to live under all that time. At number 7 on my list, I have the movie Ran by Akira Kurosawa. This is based on William Shakespeare's King Lear. We see a Japanese king who decides before he dies to divide his kingdom up among his 3 sons. He's not mentally well necessarily, and his 3 sons, his decision to divide the kingdom between his 3 sons but give the title to one of them leads to jealousy and backbiting and fighting, which destroys him and his house and has really tragic consequences. This is a beautifully shot movie. The colors, the color contrast, the look of the movie is great. The acting is kind of a little bit stylized to the time period, but also excellent. It is just a real feast. It does have brutal scenes of violence in the movie, as almost all of these do. I just thought it was a really great movie when I saw it, and I've seen it a few times since then. Number 6 on my list is Paths of Glory. I think this was Stanley Kubrick's first movie that he shot. It stars Kirk Douglas. It's based on the novel the same name by Humphrey Cobb, a Canadian veteran of World War I. And essentially, it tells a story of a mutiny among a group of French soldiers who were ordered to take an impregnable position, which was going to cost most of them their lives. And they, and more or less their officers, decided they just weren't going to go. When this mutiny took place, the original orders from the French High Command were to execute everybody in those groups. Literally hundreds of men would be executed. Eventually, they decided that would be really bad PR, so they decided to just choose a few men from each one of the groups and to execute them. And this book, it tells that story. That story, that kind of tension in the book, in terms of who gets picked and the execution, that makes it a really good and really kind of searing movie. But the visuals of World War I and soldiers attacking in World War I is just absolutely brilliant. And I have to imagine it has affected every other World War I movie that's ever been made since then. It's just a really brilliant film. Kirk Douglas is great. He's Kirk Douglas, but he's great in the movie, as are all the other actors, I thought. Number 5 on my list, I think, is the first of what's going to be several relatively new movies. And number 5 on my list is Dunkirk, written and directed by Christopher Nolan. It stars a whole lot of people, including Harry Styles, Kenneth Branagh, let's see, Mark Rylance is in it, plays a big role. Tom Hardy, Michael Caine has a tiny role in it. And then, what's his name? The guy who plays Oppenheimer, I think his first name is Kieran something, I can't remember his last name right now. He's in it too, and it basically tells the story of the evacuation of the British Expeditionary Force from the beaches of Dunkirk, a town in Belgium, where they were more or less surrounded and cut off by the German army near the beginning of World War II. And it doesn't tell the story necessarily sequentially, and it doesn't offer any kind of, there's no info dumping really that goes on, except a little bit kind of at the end. And it's just really, I thought, a brilliant look at war, at violence, at the chaos, at the roles played by individuals. It asks questions about what heroism and cowardice is, and what would you do to rescue yourself from this situation. Every time it appears like some of our characters are going to escape from being captured or killed at Dunkirk, something goes wrong. There are tragedies involved, intentional and unintentional, that take place. I just really, really like the movie, and so I put it on my list. It's my number 5. Closely related to that is my number 4 movie, and that's 1917, directed by Sam Mendes. This stars George McKay, Dean Charles Chapman, Mark Strong, Benedict Cumberbatch is in it. Some other names you'll know, and faces you'll know, because even though they have small parts and much bigger stars, this movie I just thought was just great at showing a lot of things about war, and particularly about World War I. 2 British soldiers are more or less chosen. One volunteers, the other goes with him to essentially travel across enemy territory, cross through German lines, to arrive at a place where the British are planning an attack for the next day, to call that attack off because the high command has learned that that attack's going to fail. The Germans have a lot more forces there and they're ready for it. And these two men struggle their way through no man's land, British trenches, German trenches. I love it shows the contrast between the high quality trenches the Germans created and the relatively rudimentary trench system the British created. There is a really powerful scene in a bombed out city at night. There's extreme violence, there's gore, there are lots of dead bodies, there's a brilliant scene at the end. It's just a really good movie. Has tension, it has all the World War I stuff in it that I really like. I think that's my last World War I movie. The last three, the top three, are all World War II movies, which, as I told you, it shouldn't surprise you since it's World War II movies that I really watched a lot when I was younger. So at number 3, I have The Great Escape. This is based on a book about an attempted escape from a British POW camp. It's written by Paul Brickell, I believe is his name. It stars essentially everybody. There's James Garner, there's James Caan, there's Richard Attenborough, there's Charles Bronson, there is James Coburn, not James Caan, James Coburn, there is Charles Bronson, and I'm forgetting somebody important. Oh, Steve McQueen is also in it. And it's just kind of this brilliant story about these soldiers, these prisoners of war, who are all airmen, either the British or in the American Air Corps during World War II, who are going to try to break out of this prison and get more prisoners out of this prison than at any other time, the biggest prison break ever. And their goal is to cause as much trouble for the German military behind lines to kind of divert forces from the actual fighting, which, prisoners of war were more or less supposed to do if they had the opportunity while they were imprisoned. And it's just brilliant. There are all kinds of scenes of tunneling, of escaping, of soldiers trying to pass as Germans, all the kind of clever things they came up with, from passport photos to official documents and papers to the clothing they wore to the way they disposed of the dirt they dug out of the tunnels. And then there's that great scene at the end where Steve McQueen is riding his motorcycle trying to escape from the Nazis and jumping barbed wire fences. Just an absolute great movie, a delight for me to watch every single time. And number 2 on my list is another World War II movie. This is The Eagle Has Landed. It is directed by John Sturges, written based on a novel by the spy novelist Jack Higgins. It stars Michael Caine, Robert Duvall, Donald Sutherland, Jenny Aguilar, as well as other actors you will recognize. And it centers on this plan the Germans had for kidnapping, or if they couldn't kidnap him, assassinating Winston Churchill. And it all takes place in this small British town where this group of German paratroopers led by Michael Caine show up. They, are pretending to be Polish paratroopers. They take over the town because Churchill is supposed to be somewhere near there, and they're going to try to kidnap him. There's an incompetent American colonel led by Larry Hagman. There is a completely competent American captain played by Treat Williams, and there's kind of spy stuff. There are double agents. There's a great fight scene between Donald Sutherland and a rival for the young woman he's interested in affection. And it's just a great movie. I find it entertaining. Have to have seen it 30 times, and it still entertains me every single time I see it. That brings me to my number 1 favorite war movie, and that is The Thin Red Line by Terrence Malick. Terrence Malick has a reputation for directing cerebral, visually beautiful, introspective movies, and here he's going to take on World War II and the American Army units fighting on Guadalcanal in the early stage of World War II. This is based on a novel by James Jones. I've never read the novel. I don't know how closely it adheres to it. As is true with a lot of my other favorite World War II movies that I've mentioned, this has a large ensemble cast: Sean Penn, John Cusack, Jim Caviezel, Nick Nolte, Ben Chaplin. It even has John Travolta in it for just a few minutes. The thing I like about it is, and if you know anything, my last area of research and writing was about an American military unit fighting in World War II in the Pacific that happened to be fighting in a similar place, New Guinea, to Guadalcanal at the exact same time. And it shows, I think, it does a great job of showing how difficult that war was. It primarily takes place after the beaches have been secured and fighting for the interior of the island. So there's jungle, there are mountains, and there are, really high grass. And, it gives you the kind of feeling of always these soldiers always being in danger, never knowing exactly where the enemy are, oftentimes coming under fire and not having any clue where it's coming from. They have to deal with nature in terms of the rivers, the fauna, the indigenous people of the island as well show up. It kind of contrasts the war, the violence, the ugliness of the war between the U.S. and the Japanese soldiers there with the relatively peaceful lives that the indigenous people had been living. It has brutal scenes of violence. It has really disturbing scenes, particularly near the end of the movie, once the American soldiers have overcome a Japanese position and how that all works out. And it also kind of makes I think a really good point about how the individual soldier, or the soldier at the very basic level, oftentimes has no idea what's going on or what the big plan is. They just know what they're supposed to do in a given moment at a given time. So I think it's brilliant. I think it's beautifully shot. I think it's wonderful to look at. I think it tells the story of combat soldiers in World War II in a way that's applicable to combat soldiers, I think, in their experiences in all other wars since from World War II forward. And so I just think it's a great movie. Anyway, there you go. There are my top 10 favorite war movies of all time. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below. If you have suggestions about your favorites, please feel free to leave those in the comments. I know I left out Saving Private Ryan. Did that for a reason, but I'd be happy to see you mention that and make a case for Saving Private Ryan down below. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching.